So Anna Kasparian recently debated Ben Shapiro, and as you guys know, this fusion of ideas, this combination of people, this fact that it's the Young Turks and they didn't come off particularly well, leads me to need to make a video response. That's what this is. We have a sponsor because this is a golden topic. It's Noble Gold. Let's transition and then get into the video. The word tapering is being thrown around across the media, and what that word actually means is that the federal government owes about $30 trillion, and they intend to take that $30 trillion out of your pocket. You need to protect yourself from the Federal Reserve because even they are starting to acknowledge that Janet Yellen's claims just 4 years ago that we'd never see another financial crisis in our lifetime are just not true. But Noble Gold's got you covered. Start a precious metals IRA or 401k with them and you'll be able to hedge your investments against inflation. And for this month, you will be able to get yourself an America the Beautiful 5-ounce silver coin as a gift for joining this month. This coin's awesome. It's a giant quarter. It's 5 ounces of silver. I actually really like it, and I'm grateful that they sent it to me. And if you want to get one, go to noblegoldinvestments.com using my affiliate link, pin, comment, and top of the description of this video, or call them at 877-646-5347. Again, Noble Gold, hedge against inflation. You guys know the drill. Let's get into the video. All right. I don't know what you guys want me to say about this other than thanks, Ben Shapiro, for inviting Anna Kasparian to the Chamber of Commerce to have this discussion where Anna proved that there really is nothing to her beyond the most intro, basic lefty talking points you could possibly have. Because they were all on display in this debate. And don't be fooled by the fact that this was a polite conversation, that they were friendly, that Ben Shapiro didn't take out his laser eyes that you see in all those videos and nuke her like the turkey on Freedom Tunes. This was not good for Anna Kasparian. It was a poor showing, and it really exposed her and showed how there really, again, is just nothing to this woman. And I've got examples. We're going to go over them. I'm going to say follow me on Instagram first because I'm starting up this new Instagram, trying to get to 10,000 followers. Come on, I'm posting golden, amazing stuff there. I don't even know why I said gold anymore. This is after the sponsorship. But we're going to roll into the first clip because I think it's hilarious because Anna's playing it down how much she hates the other side. And I have evidence to show how nonsensical this is.
I think that both sides certainly engage in manufactured culture wars, and it's frustrating to see it. Full disclosure, I myself have engaged in it, and I think instead of being oblivious or delusional about it, it's important to acknowledge when you've made the mistakes, right? And so the demonizing doesn't help. At the end of the day, we have to realize that we're all Americans. We all want the same thing. Fundamentally, we are the same. We might have different solutions, different ideas. Demonizing the other side doesn't help to accomplish any solutions. Again, we're seeing that play out in real time as we speak.
I could have literally done this entire video on the front that Anna Kasparian is putting on throughout the course of this debate. A perfect example of this is the clip that I just showed you, where she's like, oh, we have to realize that we're all Americans, we all have the same values, we're all on the same side, and not play into the hatred and division. This was Anna Kasparian's face and reaction after she found out that some women voted for Trump, which she deemed to be unacceptable.
I have no respect for women who voted for Trump, okay?
Yeah, me too.
I think so poorly of them, and the reason why is because, look, I don't think that you're a single issue voter, I just think you're dumb. Okay, I think you're fucking dumb. When you vote for someone who openly treats women like second-class citizens, who talks about them as if they're nothing more than a piece of meat, who has been accused of sexually assaulting them, who has been caught on tape talking about groping them and grabbing them by the pussy without consent, yeah, you're an idiot. You're an idiot, yes. Okay? You are voting against your best interests. I'm losing my mind tonight because of how stupid the majority of the country is.
All Anna Kasparian does is demonize the other side. All Anna Kasparian does is call the other side racist, talk about how she thinks they're dumb, how she doesn't believe that they're good people, how she thinks they're nefarious, how she thinks that no matter what, anytime somebody disagrees with the progressive position, they're bought off by corporations. And they say, oh, look, it's not that they're evil, it's not that they're particularly bad, they're just willing to sell out everybody for a $5,000 campaign donation. And Anna is going to come onto this stage and talk about how she is in favor of unity and how we always have to remember, no matter what, when it all comes down to it, when the rubber hits the road, that we're all Americans. Come on. Like, the fact that this wasn't called out just shows a lack of experience with the Young Turks. Obviously, I would have called them out, but obviously the Chamber of Commerce would not be inviting me to have this discussion. Now, that's the only hypocritical point that we're going to make throughout the entire course of this debate. Well, the only personal hypocrisy point we're going to make when we're discussing this debate. What I want to focus on now is just something that shows you how out of touch people on the left actually are, and specifically Anna Kasparian, and it's just a beautiful example of it. So I just want to play it for you and see if you catch it.
Beside the point, I don't think that the culture wars are fake. I think the culture wars are taking place. The point that I'm trying to make is that oftentimes, whatever the culture war is of that moment, it is manufactured as a distraction. A perfect example will be, critical race theory, which is not taught in elementary schools. Critical race theory is a graduate level curriculum. And the fact that it's turned into some weird, we need to ban critical race theory in elementary schools, it's ridiculous and a massive distraction that I think is intentionally meant to be a distraction from what people are really feeling frustrated about. The precariousness of their lives, of their work lives, the fact that people feel overworked, that they have no control over the work that they're doing, that they feel alienated over the work that they're doing. These are very real issues, and I think that, the fact that it's really largely been ignored by both the press and the very political leaders who were elected to represent them in the first place has led to the anger that we're seeing bubbling up both on the left and the right.
So what you just witnessed there is the distillation of lefty elitism that we see all the time in this country, but rarely do we ever get such a good example of it. What the issue was, what the topic was that was brought up, was the idea of critical race theory being taught in our public education system, which, by the way, as Ben Shapiro lays out very eloquently and very quickly and concisely, this is in fact happening despite Anna Kasparian's denials. But we'll get to that later, trust me. But Anna's reaction to this is to say that parents who are out in these school board meetings causing such a ruckus that the school boards are running scared, calling the FBI, labeling these parents terrorists, are actually not concerned about this. They're being misled because what they're actually concerned about is alienation from their work. Marxist garbage from Anna Kasparian. How unsurprising that this is just a distraction, that this doesn't really matter, and what's really happening is the elites are controlling their minds.
It's ridiculous and a massive distraction that I think is intentionally meant to be a distraction from what people are really feeling frustrated about. The precariousness of their lives, of their work lives, the fact that people feel overworked, that they have no control over the work that they're doing, that they feel alienated.
Now, the reason Anna Kasparian is saying this is because she wants this to be true, and she believes personally that critical race theory is not something that parents should be angry about being taught in the schools. Now, she's playing the game where she says it isn't taught, but she's in favor of it. Again, we'll get to that later. But fundamentally, this is the actual divide between the left and the right put out in front of us right here. These people are telling you what their values are. They're telling you what they're concerned with. They're telling you what they're interested in. But Anna fundamentally rejects these people's own accounts of what they're concerned with, of what they're interested in, because she believes that she knows better what's affecting their lives, their families, and their children than they themselves do, even though they are living their own lives. This is purely and in an unfiltered way elitism from Anna Kasparian. Again, she doesn't believe that you should be concerned about this. Therefore, the fact that you are concerned about this means that somebody else more powerful is puppeting you, because Anna can't possibly relate or understand the concern, which is hilarious. You would think that Anna would be able to acknowledge that she's not a parent, so therefore she doesn't know the pressures of a parent wondering what her kids are being taught in schools. But again, Anna's actually in favor of this. She's in favor of this leftist indoctrination because she accepts it to be fact. It's a part of her ideology.
Ben, I think you wanted to make a couple comments.
Yeah, I mean, this will be a very quick note. I mean, I obviously disagree with you about critical race theory and whether it is taught in the public schools. Critical race theory, which I studied in law school, it started off as a legal theory, but it has an element of praxis and practice that was meant to be implemented, which is why it is taught in education schools as well, and why
in elementary schools.
Yes,
though?
a very boiled down. I mean, Ibram X. Kendi is preaching a very boiled down version of critical race theory, and his book is assigned in elementary schools. I mean, the fact is that when you are having elementary school students who are having to check off boxes with regard to their race and then explain to each other whether they are historically privileged or not in 4th or 5th grade, that's a very dumbed down version of critical race theory. There's sort of a game that gets played with regard to legal theories that end up being boiled down. Intersectionality is another great example of this. Kimberly Crenshaw writes a very intelligent law review article about intersectionality and how you can be a member of more than one minority group and be discriminated against in a variety of ways. And then that is used as the basis for a much broader move in American political life. And then as soon as you point that out, they say, well, that's not intersectionality, it's the original law review article. That's a bit of no true Scotsman games playing. And so I object to that. And look, it is a relevant issue when you have Terry McAuliffe, who's running for governor of Virginia, literally saying in open debate that it should not be parents who are making the educational decisions for their children. It should be the people in education. I mean, that is a culture war issue that I think is of key importance to people who have kids, right?
Well, see, I mean, I think that that's part of what leads to the lack of trust in our institutions. I mean, yes, as a parent, you get to make decisions about which school you want your kid to go to. If you're uncomfortable with the public school curriculum, you can take a look at private school options. If you don't want that, you can homeschool. But who gets to be I mean, if we're talking about parents making those decisions, who gets to be the arbiter of, you know, which parent gets to be the arbiter of what gets taught in any particular public school? I'm not really buying that they're learning about critical race theory or even a boiled down. I'm positive that, you know, elementary schools are not learning about systemic racism. And even if they are, even if it's a boiled down version of that, learning about systemic racism is important. I think that that's something that's an issue in this country that gets ignored or completely denied, and I think that's wrong. I think that's what also leads to the division that we're experiencing.
Well,
So you see what happens right there? Anna Kasparian says that it's not being taught, it's not a thing, don't worry about it, it's not happening. Ben Shapiro retorts, he explains this Ibram X. Kendi video is being shown in schools, his book is being recommended in public schools. There are thousands of examples of this. I did an entire K through 12 education series on this channel. I will link the playlist in the description for you. But more fundamentally, when pressed on this, Anna says that they should be teaching it, and the examples that Shapiro gave of it happening are actually good. Classic Mott and Bailey. It's not happening, it's not happening. Then when you explain exactly why it is happening, you show examples of it happening, Anna Kasparian, just like all the lefties that do this exact trick, say, well, that is good, we should be teaching that, that's fundamentally a good thing, and they support it. Denial, deceit, and deflection, people, this is the tactics that they use to get around actually addressing the points that people are concerned about. And of course, what ends up happening is the people who are complaining become the problem, rather than the actual problem that they're complaining about. But it gets even more interesting a little bit later on because Anna tries to start up a conversation about systemic racism, and Ben Shapiro once again concisely puts her in her place.
That if you're going to teach,
you think there's no systemic racism?
I believe that it depends on how you define systemic racism. So if you're talking about legal regimens of racism, no. If you're talking about history has after effects, of course. So I think there's a real problem with semantic overload in a lot of our political conversations. And when people say systemic racism, sometimes what they mean by systemic racism is history has consequences. You can't have 150 years of, 300 years of slavery followed by Jim Crow and that not have after effects, which of course is true. And sometimes what they mean is that every inequality in American public life is due to some systemic inequity that is currently taking place in the United States, which I think is absolutely 100% false.
Again, Anna, when she talks about systemic racism, talks about unequal outcome. And in that way, systemic racism as the cause of unequal outcome is absolute nonsense. The idea that there is history, therefore there are after effects, that's just cause and effect. That's the concept of linear time. If that's all these people were talking about, we would never need to have this discussion. But it's really funny that Anna immediately goes to an example of systemic racism, or what she believes to be an example of systemic racism, and then gets shut down again.
I mean, we certainly see that playing out in our criminal justice system. Are you going to deny that, or are you going to say that, let's say, African Americans or Latinos are just inherently more criminal or
I'm not going to say either of those things. I'm going to say that
so why are they overrepresented in our prisons?
I mean,
especially when you consider
this may be beyond the scope of our conversation, but the answer is because not all groups commit crimes at the same level. That has nothing to do with genetics. That has everything to do with circumstances.
Can you guys hold those thoughts on education? Because I do want to.
Now, of course, Ben's answer right there is correct. different groups disproportionately commit more crimes. The groups that Anna Kasparian named were Black and Hispanic Americans. They commit more crime than whites or Asians, so we would expect more of them to be in prison than whites or Asians, or disproportionately more of them to be in prison than whites or Asians.
Going to deny that, or are you going to say that, let's say, African Americans or Latinos are just inherently more criminal?
But what I find really amusing about Anna Kasparian is that she added in this talking point that comes straight from the regressive online Twitch left. I believe Surfs and Vosh both brought this point up to me where they're like, oh, are you saying it's genetic or inherent or something like that? Because if you can't explain the gap by saying it's not these people's fault, then somehow that ends up becoming an issue of it being a genetic issue. So that's Anna Kasparian right there, loading the question up in such a way where you either accept her premises that it's discrimination, or you're racist, therefore we should not accept your premises because you're likely in favor of the discrimination. Again, really shady and disgusting tactic, and I don't care how nice Anna is trying to be on this debate stage, it's clear and obvious to me because I've had this tactic wielded against me multiple different times, and just like Ben Shapiro in this instance, it is not something that anybody beyond level 0 of disgusting crime can actually deal with. It is a crime denier tactic because Anna Kasparian is a crime denier. When you start talking about disproportionate people being incarcerated under the premise that there isn't insanely disproportionate rates of violent crime in this country, you're a crime denier.
It means that if you're one of the 55 corporations that literally paid absolutely nothing in federal income taxes in 2020, and in fact received $3.5 billion in tax refunds or rebates, or tax refunds, I should say, maybe you should pay your fair share. But here's the thing, if the tax code is written in a way where corporations can legally take advantage of loopholes and incredibly low effective corporate tax rates, they're gonna do it.
So this is yet another pointless, stupid point that is constantly brought up by the left. And of course, it's around corporate tax rates. Corporate tax rates. Did you know that this many top corporations aren't paying anything in corporate tax for the year? Isn't it crazy that these corporations are somehow getting money back from the government? It's almost as if we have a tax code that for over half or close to half of individuals actually produces the same outcomes depending on the inputs that you put in as a business. And I can't stand the corporate tax rate conversation because it's fundamentally built on the idiotic idea that corporation equals bad, and this works in people's brains, so they think that the corporations are somehow cheating the system, when in reality, they're claiming very similar tax deductions that we as individuals can claim. And in some instances, they're actually claiming the same exact tax deductions. Like if you go to work and you have to pay for some unique form of transportation, you can deduct that against your taxes when you do your taxes. I don't know if you guys know this. Maybe you don't do your own taxes. Maybe you're not that informed about your own taxes, but this is commonplace. However, on top of that, businesses, even giant companies that you think are staples, are often not as profitable as you imagine. In fact, a lot of them are not profitable at all or in any given year. And the way the corporate tax rate works is that it is a tax on profits. And that is a tax on their net profits going back to the start of the corporation. Because if you're a company and you take loss after loss after loss, and then one year you make a little bit of profit, typically what happens with that money is you have to use that to cover your past year's losses. Now, there's a limit to how far back you can go to write off past losses against your profits, but if you think about this logically and not in an emotional way, it makes perfect sense. And these are the same tax structures, by the way, that work for small businesses that are incorporated, sole proprietorships like what I run, and multinational corporations. Great example of this is Amazon or Netflix. These companies operated at losses for years. There's a reason why the media will report their revenue instead of, their actual profit when they're talking about corporate tax rates, because you're like, giant company, even though it's being fueled by investors and it's running at a loss, and your brain thinks, oh my God, they're cheating the system. And another trick that people like to do is they like to Google the gross profits, because even though most people get their income and they have a gross income and then they have their take-home pay, their net income, for some ungodly reason, when they see the word gross profits, they can't make the same delineation in their brain. So they'll say, oh, Netflix is profitable. Look at their gross profits. When it's their net profits that matter, you haven't subtracted significant amounts of stuff that they need to actually have to run their business when you do that. But yeah, I won't go on for too much longer on this, but fundamentally, the idea that corporate income tax even needs to exist, let alone that these corporations are somehow cheating the system, when in reality what they're doing is writing off past losses going back a period of time, which makes sense. You wouldn't be able to operate a business if you were taxed on money that you were actually losing instead of money that you were making, is absolute nonsense. Also, Ben Shapiro points out, and Anna Kasparian kind of just glosses over it because she can't argue against it, that all these dollars are taxed in multiple different ways that don't necessarily need to come from the corporate income tax.
Since the 1970s, the notion that the middle class has been destroyed is a fallacy. The middle class has largely become the upper middle class.
Nearly 50% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency.
Now, long-term viewers of this channel will remember that we've talked about this multiple different times. The idea that you think, any of you out there, that 41%, or Anna says 50% because, she's exaggerating the number in her brain. The actual Federal Reserve study said 41% of people would go broke due to a $400 emergency is absolutely insane and patently absurd. As we've talked about, this is a headline story. When people see the headline, they just run with it. It goes into politicians' speeches, and then over time, this misinformation being spouted out by Anna Kasparian becomes fact in the minds of a lot of Americans. But if you go to the Federal Reserve actual study and you read it for yourself, you will find out that obviously 41 or 39% or 40% or 50%, according to Anna Kasparian, of Americans are not $400 away from financial ruin. They're not a small car repair away from financial ruin. They're not a small car insurance deductible away from financial ruin. What this study showed, according to the Federal Reserve, and by the way, it was a survey of about 11,000 people or so, was that 61% of Americans said if they had an unexpected expense of $400 or more, that they would use cash, their savings account, which is also a checking or savings like cash on hand, a credit card, and then pay it off at the end of the month to cover said emergency. Everyone else in that 41% includes people who would use a credit card and pay it off over 2 statements or more, or people who would borrow the money from a friend to cover a $400 expense. And in fact, according to the Federal Reserve survey that Anna Kasparian and all these left-wingers are citing, the people who said that they could not afford in any way, shape, or form a $400 expense, not emergency, only amounted to 12% of those people surveyed. And also, let me add this so you guys can understand it clearly and concisely, I don't believe those 12%. Because if you can't afford a $400 emergency, you have no possible way, no family members, no friends, no whatever, no credit card that you can put it on and even pay it off over 5 months, how are you even alive? Honestly, how are you even alive? It's ridiculous. The idea that it's that high is more inflationary panic statistics from the left so that they can use to advocate for their position. And by the way, that's what we're going to go into next because Anna cited this chart of all things that I've debunked multiple different times.
How free do you feel if you're a wage worker who has not experienced your real wages increase in literally decades? Wages have not kept up with inflation. Wages have been stagnant since the 1970s. So the argument that, these companies are competing for labor, it's a cute argument until you take a look at the actual data.
So I've gone over this myth so many different times, it's actually getting ridiculous at this point. But then again, this is the channel that debunked Michael Brown 484 times if I'm giving a low-end estimate. But this comes from a chart from the Economic Policy Institute, which compares the growth in productivity for workers versus the growth in wages for typical workers. And those of you who remember my response to Cynical Historian, where I didn't go through anything else in his video because I didn't care about anything else in his video, and I dedicated the entire thing to this chart, will know exactly where I'm going with this. So this chart is deceptive in a bunch of different ways, and I've seen Anna reference this multiple different times. I've seen Cenk reference this multiple different times, but the first and most obvious way is that the top line, the productivity line, includes supervisors and all these different management positions. Their productivity is included in the top line. However, the bottom line is only typical non-supervisor, non-managers. So already, just based on that, we have an apples to oranges comparison. On top of that, the bottom line is using the inflation adjustments from the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. And the way that you can find this is you can go to the bottom of these charts and see that they're getting the lines from two different pieces of information. The CPI is extremely inflationary. It's in fact criticized often as being far too inflationary. However, the top line, which is the productivity line, is using a more deflationary metric. That is the implicit price deflator, the IPD. Might be called something different, but it's IPD. Sources will be in the description of this. So you have two different inflation charts, you have two different sets of workers being compared, and that's what Anna Kasparian is referencing in here. It's completely false. Anybody who cites it never bothered to do the legwork, and cynical historian, the weakest, cowardly person I've ever encountered on the internet, actually called me a bigot in his Discord when confronted with this irrefutable evidence and me citing the sources below the chart that he used himself because he said he found it in two books. Therefore, it must be true. He can literally retrace my steps, but I'm a bigot because he's lazy. So yeah, I'm tired of talking about this chart. Anna Kasparian cited it in this. She's dead wrong in it. Everybody who cites this chart is dead wrong, and they're lazy. They just believe anything that you can put on a chart.
I disagree with the way that they're handling the homelessness issue as well, although I think my solutions might be a little different. I think that this idea of being incredibly laxed with camping has been pretty disastrous and has attracted, homelessness isn't just a California issue, it's an issue throughout the country. But when other states are pretty strict against encampments, and California is very laxed, what do you think that's going to do? It's going to attract homelessness.
Now, the final thing that I want to go over is Anna Kasparian talking about homelessness versus Anna Kasparian talking about immigration. Now, you just heard in that clip, Anna was talking about how California has essentially, through their camping legislation, which allows homeless people to set up camps anywhere, led to a situation where homeless people are incentivized to come to California. This is a magnet. It draws people in due to the fact that California and other places covered by, I believe, the Ninth Circuit Court, which said it's a constitutional right to camp in public, are drawn to there because of the friendly treatment that they get. Now, the reason I'm highlighting this and explaining that Anna Kasparian is actually correct in her analysis on why so many homeless people are camping on the street in California and other Western states in this country is because when it comes to immigration, which is only 10 to 15 minutes later in this video, Anna does not understand the concept of magnets anymore.
Between 1970 and 1993, they experienced exorbitantly low rates of growth. And the reason for that was because they radically overburdened their social safety net systems. It created enormous social problems. It created enormous immigration problems. They had to scale a lot of those back. And
why would it create immigration problems?
It created immigration problems because a lot of people were coming specifically for the benefits.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes, that would be to my point, which is it creates more problems very often than it's.
Sure, I guess that's a.
Yes, if I put a free donut sign in my shop, people will come for the donut.
No, but if you have a robust.
Now, this video doesn't have a lot of Ben Shapiro burns like we typically see in the debates. It's structured as a much more friendly conversation. In fact, when the conversation was about to get interesting and they were about to talk about crime, the moderator, for some ungodly reason, pulled the topic away from that, which was shameful. It would have been way more fun had he not done so. But this moment was absolutely great because Ben Shapiro is explaining the same concept that Anna heard not too long ago, and Anna, because she just says things in an uninformed way like most lefties do without any care for consistency, is reacting to it like she never heard that argument. She literally made that argument earlier in this debate when we were talking about homeless people. Why Anna thinks that applies to homeless people and not to immigrants who come from poorer countries, I'll never understand. But the reason I wanted to close with this is because it is the perfect distillation of how far the range of Anna Kasparian's intellect actually goes. Now, with all that being said, this is a friendly reminder that I was recently in Dallas, Texas, and I was on 3 separate Blaze shows: News and Why It Matters with Sarah Gonzalez, Elijah Schaefer's show, Slightly Offensive, and Sydney Watson and Elijah Schaefer's show, You Are Here. All of these will be linked in the description. Please go over and follow them, because not only did they invite me on all these shows, Elijah actually invited me to stay in his home. I broke bread with the man. Me and him talked, and his wife was there. I got to get to know her. It was nice. It was wonderful. It was lovely. The hospitality should be shared, and you guys should share the love that they showed me with their channel by subscribing. And if you don't know, huge fan of Sydney Watson, one of the very few people that I knew nothing about before meeting in person, only to find out later she makes excellent content. So subscribe to You Are Here, subscribe to Slightly Offensive, subscribe to the News and Why It Matters, which is on the Blaze channel, not its own separate channel, but they got a podcast. Go do that. Show these people the respect that they showed me. Leave comments, do the things, demand that they invite me on every single day, and feed me stuff. I really didn't have anything to close. They were really nice. Also, TSA in Dallas Fort Worth Airport, I know for a fact you stole my belt. Even though I paid $7 for it, this is now a blood feud between you and me. I'm coming for you, and I don't mean that in a threat in any way. Please don't put me on a no-fly list. It's fine. I was running late for my plane, but I am upset about it. $7 that belt cost me. It's a principle. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, you can show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content. Social media is linked in the description. Follow my new Instagram. Support me via the support links also in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the thing with the Anna and the Ben Shapiro. Till next time.